Changing rooms with Dulux brought in 5 million more liters of paint sold because of that show. That younger generation today is choosing brands based on what they represent, and it's not necessarily on the product itself. Is do the values of that brand represent me? Instead of putting 60% of the budget into advertising, you might put 40, and then 20% goes to entertainment. Most of us are skipping it. So a very good part of this, what we are doing, is actually in line with what audiences are looking for.
That opportunity for people to find community through entertainment and those live experiences is inevitably where things are going to be going. Hello everyone, welcome to the Speakeasy. I'm Joe Condon. This is Gabriella Geisinger, and today we are joined by Carlotta Rossi Spencer from Banijay. Carlotta, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
If you want to start just a little bit of your background, how you got to Banijay Entertainment and the stuff you've done leading up to that has informed what you're doing in your role now.
So I started as a journalist, and that actually is exactly what's helped me throughout my career, because it's about curiosity and it's about talking to people and getting information, and you always need that. So the basis of everything I've done has been storytelling and story making. And this is, where we are today with Banijay. We've been doing that for a very long time, as you know, in production and in telling stories and entertainment and scripted and unscripted and everything. So that's part of the basis of everything. But I did journalism. I did comms for quite a while. A lot of journalists move into comms, because it makes life slightly easier. And then I moved into, and I did broadcast journalism. And then I went back to television, which is my real passion. And I started, with a few contracts that I had over time. So it was mostly in format acquisitions and format development. I did a lot of business affairs. So it was covering a lot of different parts of the business. And that's where you really learn. So I always say to younger generation, try to learn from a lot of different places, because if you start being too specific, then it's going to be a hassle, especially today. So I've been across a lot of different things, and then I joined Banijay right at the beginning, and I've been there for 11 years. And I started with format, like content acquisition, so formats, but not only in development. That was in Italy, and then I moved to London. And I did acquisitions for the entire group. And then after that, I set up, and this is why we're here today, I set up a division that it's called BBE, Banijay Branded Entertainment, that is focused on working with brands in a lot of different territories. So Banijay has production companies in 25 territories. Most of these territories and some of the producers in these territories have dedicated teams that work on commercial bits like branded and more institutional, maybe videos and all of this. And so I've started coordinating them. And then we've started setting up basically it's a business strategy to work more with brands directly and work with agencies, so media and advertising agencies. So that is where we are today. Quite, everything seems different, but it's actually across the board. It is about telling the right stories, right? And it's about identifying where those stories can be right for certain audiences. So that's where we are today.
Can we take a tiny step back? Because I don't think people understand the scale of Banijay sometimes, and the different verticals that you have within the business. So would you be able to just walk people through that?
So Banijay has about 130 companies scattered in 25 territories. We are mainly focused on entertainment and scripted, of course. We don't do we don't do movies, but it's all about entertainment. So that's the production. The core of it is and continues to be production, content production. That content production and those talents have extended to, my branded, which is, a part of it. The other big element in the group is Banijay Live, which is all about experiential adventures, I would call them at this point, because, we've just launched, Black Mirror, for example.
Yeah.
But it's all about also, with a company that's called Balich Studios, and basically they do the big live events around the globe, starting from the Olympics, opening ceremonies, and everything you can imagine. So it's a big production, but it's also the big live bit that is massive. So we are the biggest we're the biggest distributor in the world currently of content, and that puts us, as an independent, meaning we're not tied to a studio, an independent company that is basically the biggest distribution content provider through Banijay rights. So the scale is quite massive. Yes.
Maybe because you've got the production side,
Yeah.
you've got the live, obviously there's...
And then there's sports as well. Yes. There's sports because it's live and sports is very much tied into the content, I would say, because we look at sports as what can we produce that is adjacent to actual sports events. So we don't produce the actual sports events except for in some cases, maybe locally, but we want to bring in content that is tied to that. And of course, anything that you see, and like Drive to Survive, that's a sports content that is adjacent to the races of Formula One. So all of that is something that we're concentrating on as well.
That's a growing part of
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, from obviously sports, with our sports hound as well.
Yeah.
I think that's been a huge part of how a lot of sports IP are trying to grow the storytelling around it as well. Like everyone knows live, everyone kind of engages with their audiences in different ways, but I think that's always been an underserved element of it. And I think like the super fan has always been really well served, but not necessarily like the casual fan.
Yeah.
I think that's sort of become so interesting from kind of that shoulder programming, if you will. So.
But again, I think that's interesting because again, it is part of how you tell the stories, and it's not just, I'll show you a live event, right? I'll show you everything that happens and, what the stories behind that event are and what the people are, what their stories are and what their personal journey is. So that's what we are specialized in doing.
Yeah.
That's quite interesting. That bit is very interesting.
But it's interesting because I think also you talk about storytelling and how integral that is to all of these different sections that Banijay has. But I'm curious as to when you're working with a brand, how do you sort of balance making sure that you stay true to this inherent sort of integral part of what you do, which is creating a story and creating something entertaining and connecting, right, to not just a super fan, but a casual fan, and really hitting all those audiences, when you also have a brand or a client that has a specific target or a specific goal or a specific message that they want to get across?
So I think what's really important in that, and I always say this, but it's crucial because we make entertainment. So we have to start from the basics, and it is about making entertainment and drawing in audience. The main thing is, would that audience watch that show, regardless of the fact that it's with a brand? So that's where we come from. Because, you can't approach this, if a brand approaches this kind of marketing solution, because in the end it is a marketing solution, it has to be aware that you're getting into the realm that is different from advertising. So you're not pushing necessarily one single product. You're not pushing something that people need to buy, but you are focusing on very different elements, which could be the positioning, which could be the awareness of the brand, which could be, the perception of it, or anything tied to maybe CSR, and those bits are the ones that, of course, are closer to the storytelling. And so it is always, I think it's always a matter of the brand choosing branded entertainment because they need that in that moment of their history, of the history of the brand. And it doesn't cancel out any advertising they're doing, right? Because the advertising is advertising. We see it, we're bound, and actually most of us are skipping it. So a very good part of this, what we are doing, is actually in line with what audiences are looking for. But it's key not to confuse a piece of like 30 seconds and a piece of 3 episodes, 4 episodes of entertainment. So that's where we come in and we talk with a brand. So they work with us and we work with them. It's a partnership, really. So it's not just the brand saying, we want this, we want to do this, this is the money. That's where we say no.
Right.
I guess it's been like you're talking about the importance of brand and the storytelling around it. There has been, especially from an advertising perspective, like much more of a focus on performance, like,
Yes.
how can you get as much reach to as many people as possible. Yeah. Whereas I think purely because of maybe the tech landscape we're in now, let's call it, there is much more of a push back to brand, and that becoming much more important. Like, how do you stand out from the crowd, differentiate? I think that's where it becomes so much more important that people understand like what your brand represents, and
Yes.
entertainment and content is a great way to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's that, it's that bit of what do you want to get out of the investment that you're making? And then, we can talk about measurements, which is a bit more complicated on brand and entertainment, but what do you really want to get out? Is it because you want to reach your core audience and make them, continue to choose you? Because that's the thing. It's a psychological choice that you're making, especially, we always talk about younger generation, which is, extremely important. But that younger generation today, and we've seen studies, we've all seen them, is choosing brands based on what they represent. And it's not necessarily on the product itself, is do the values of that brand represent me, and are they, choice worthy? So when you're able to tell what the values are through a very compelling or fun or entertaining, it doesn't matter, because we do all the genres that you can think about, story, then you're hitting the right audience and you're getting to the right result. Will that lead to more sales? Possibly, but it's a long tail, right? So advertising, short, boom, 2 months on the air, it's a very short tail. Ours is a very much longer long tail also, because if you're on platforms, for example, on streamers, you're there for as long as you want. And I can go back and forth and continue to watch that same content or discover it over time.
Maybe we can talk about that process. So like how you're matching brands with the right genre or title as well. Because I guess, the breadth of content that you have is huge. So figuring out like what their objectives are, how you integrate it in the right kind of way so the audiences don't necessarily feel it's out of place.
Yes. So that's part of the study, and that's part of the analysis, and that's part of working with a brand, going back to the word partnership. So because again, we can do documentaries, game shows, factual shows, reality, dating, anything is there for, it's up for grabs. But if you look at something like, and I like to give this example because nobody would have thought about it, but if you look at something which is very dear to some UK audiences, which is Secret Life of 4 or 5 year olds, which used to be on air on Channel 4. It was a format a while back. It had a lot of success. It was beautiful because it was tender. It's about little kids and their behavior and interviews with the kids. So beautiful show. You would never think that kind of show could be ideal for a brand, right? If you just step back and look at the show. Whereas we were able to turn that into content only for digital platforms with Channel 4 for a brand, which is E.ON, which is an energy provider, and E.ON Next. And basically what that show brought to E.ON was, in a much shorter form, so 5-minute max, the format is the same. So you have the kids, you have the short interviews, you watch them play, you watch them interact. The difference is, in their interviews and their interactions, they talk about some of the topics that are very dear to E.ON Next, and also to all of us. So energy consumption, water, all of this. And that is how you do it. We found the right match because they wanted to be recognized in terms of the content. Is it recognizable? Absolutely. Is it a light way and not, pushing, certain things in a very let me teach you how to, not use as much energy as you used to, is it the right way to tell the story that they need to tell? Yes. And so we're able to do that. And that always happens. So if, we're talking about CSR, we did another show with Nissan, which is called Dare to Defy. And it's all about, Paralympians talking about, the strength and the ability to be there and to be an athlete, even, with challenges. And it's not about selling a car. It's about the values that Nissan wants to push, right? So that's more in the documentary side. So it depends. It is delicate, but also if you go to the right professionals, they will guide you. So if a brand comes to us and says, I want to do a cooking show, and there is no reason for that brand to do a cooking show, but they should be doing a travel show, for example, then we will guide them. So that's our job.
Yeah, no, I think it's super interesting. Like you kind of talked around measurement as well.
Yes.
And I guess for every brand, it's very different what success looks like.
Yeah,
I guess, as you
right.
say, it's taking them on that journey of finding the right kind of show, finding the right audience, but then also figuring out like what the longer term view around it looks. So we'd love to dive into that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, there's not, in comparison to advertising, there's not one set way of measuring for branded entertainment, because it's younger, because people do it in different ways. We have a lot of different access points, meaning you could be on a traditional broadcaster, on a streamer, on again, going back to the example that I was referring to earlier, you could be a digital show, right? So there's all different ways of measuring. Because we come from entertainment and we want to have a successful piece of entertainment, we look at our traditional metrics. So how many people are watching the show? How long do they stay? We have massive successes with like the World Cook on Prime, Live Italian again on Prime, which have, more than 90% rate of people actually staying from the beginning to the end of the show. And that's a success, from the point of view of a producer. The impact that those numbers have on the brand is something that brands and marketing agencies and media agencies need to measure. They do it with us. But I think, we're getting to a good place with branded entertainment finally, where people are starting to understand that it does have an impact. If our show that we did, Changing Rooms with Dulux, brought in 5 million more liters of paint sold because of that show, that is an immediate, not immediate in terms of time frame, but an immediate way of measuring, the sales. So at the end of the day, is the brand coming to us because they need more sales? So we will sit down and say, this is what we think should be your positioning in terms of entertainment. The sales bit is something you and marketing need to support, because of course, it's an ecosystem. It's just a show. The show lives on a platform. You build an ecosystem around the show in order for that show to ramp up your sales. But then you have another, it is part of a marketing mix. It's just, it won't live by itself, just floating on a Prime platform, thinking that you're going to, sell so much more because you've done that. It's, it's part of it. It's a plug-in. Yeah. So I think it's very important to have results, but it's also very important to know from the get-go what you're looking for. So going back to what we discussed earlier, is it the values that you want people to, and then you have the measurement on the values, right? How is that brand perceived? Is it sales? That's another way, right? So we do all of that. Just think about it as content driving a strategy that is actually linked to a marketing positioning. So that's where we are. That's where we are plugged in.
Are you seeing more and more brands coming to you that are already thinking that way, that have branded entertainment as part of their strategy from the get-go?
They're starting. I think it's starting. I think more and more need to take the leap. It's just because I it's not easy to change what you've been doing for like 20 years and go into something new. It is a leap at the end of the day. But if you come to people that are used to making these shows and have access, because we are platform agnostic, we have access to any kind of, outlet at the end of the day, then you're in a much better place than saying, let me go to my creative agency, my ad agencies, and they will make content. It's not, we don't make advertising. So it's come to the right people. The right people will guide you. So more and more are doing that.
It's an interesting perspective, I think, also because you see more and more brands that are directly investing in production as well, right? So where's the sort of balance between doing that and then creating a piece of branded entertainment?
I think, I mean, if they invest in production, it means they want to do more and more entertainment. And I think that's also linked to their digital presence. So is it YouTube vertical channels? Is it all their socials, etc.? If you have an internal team, of course, that helps. There's, we always say, I think you should try out entertainment before you go full on and set up a team internally, because it might not be the right thing for that brand. It might not be something that you do over time, over and over. It might be one-off, and then the next year you don't do it, and then you come back. So it's happening more and more. I think those things are happening more for, again, digital things that are easier to just do quite quickly. So we do those as well. But is it easier to have a small team going out and, shooting something? Probably sometimes. But
and what about brands that are investing in like film and like rather than coming to it from a branded perspective, coming to it from an investment perspective? Yep. So like, coming in on a A24 film, for example, or Neon or something like that. Do you see any sort of overlap or tension there? No,
I think that's another kind of investment, another choice in the marketing mix that you can have. I mean, that's more about, I want to go with, like, maybe it's a talent, right? Or I want to go with that movie because I want to be positioned, like The White Lotus, for example, right? And The White Lotus has within it storylines where very strong product placement is there, but the hotel itself is a great example, right? And it's intertwined in the narrative, but could have been any hotel, but it's not, right? So I think that's a choice, but then you use that is slightly different to actually creating the content, which is what we want to do with the brand.
So it's all part
Still
of that, like you're saying, it's all part of that.
They're all adjacent, everything is adjacent. And by the way, going back to your first question about, the scale, I think what's interesting is, yes, we can do the production, fine, creativity, production, the sale. We can do everything that is adjacent to that, which means, socials, the platforms, whatever is digital. We can do the live version of a content that we produce. We can do the merchandising and licensing attached to it. So the whole thing is covered in one place, which is us. And so that is, if somebody wants to do product placement in our shows, they can. It's fine. Do you want to do more? And we can cover that more. But it's all, it's all bits and pieces. Yeah.
Can we talk around because you mentioned like the design, let's say, of like how brands are actually integrating into the content. So like how early in the process is that starting? Like, are you finding that for some it's, if they're in from the get-go, that they can get a much more kind of ingrained kind of showing, let's say, within it? Or is there a way that brands, as you say, they see talent or they see a story and, later down in the process, they kind of come in there? So like, I guess I'm figuring out like, where's the sweet spot if there is one, or is it, there's multiple opportunities throughout that process?
I think for this is, let's say this is product placement, right? Let's give it a name. So if it's with a product placement and you come in, and of course the genres make it very different. So if you're in the scripted end of it, you have to come in at the beginning, because then you write down, even, if you look at Emily in Paris with the McDonald's, presence, I think it was season 1 or 2, but that was script that was written in order to be part of the story, and they probably came in like a year early, right? So for entertainment, it's not that, entertainment of course has much shorter production timings, but it's always good to be there from the beginning, because people are used to seeing products. But at the same time, you have to respect the audience. You can't continue to show the product and be like, it's always in your face. You have to respect that, the fact that I'm still watching a show, right, as a viewer. So coming in early makes it much easier to understand where the right bits for your brand should be, and not to be too invasive, I would say. So, but meaning better to do it early. It doesn't mean you can't do it later along the line, right? And along, the production process. It's that's a much more straightforward approach. Whereas branded entertainment is completely different, where you're building something. And even the example that I was giving before about the 4-year-olds, you're building something that is a recognizable show, but you're making it in a new way for a brand. So there you have to be careful also how to calibrate, right? So we always start from scratch, from a piece of paper with a brand.
Really cool. I guess at the show, Secretary London last year, a lot of the conversations around like that funding side of things.
Yes.
So, you know, there's been so many ways that people have got shows or content kind of produced over the years. Like, how important is this branded kind of entertainment side becoming?
Yeah, I think it's becoming quite important because we all know that budgets are not what they used to be. We all know that commissioners are struggling, to pay what they would like to pay, because it would be great to be in a situation where the money is there. So it's becoming quite important. There's different ways and I always say there's not a set way of doing things with brands, because as long as you're in the space of respecting the content and respecting the brand, you can find a lot of different business ways of models to work with brands. So sometimes, we have a shortfall and we need, a brand to come in. And so in that case, we work with the broadcaster, we work with the editorial team, we work with the commercial teams, and then we find a brand that can, fill in the gap, I would say. Other times, is it, a commissioner that says, I really would love to do that show. Let's all work together from the start to find, maybe a brand that can work with us. And maybe it's already a brand that is within, the commissioners, the broadcasters group of brands working with them. So I would say it's becoming more and more important because of the fact that there is less money.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that brands will be your solution. It is still very hard. It is still complicated. You still have to find the right project. You still have to fit in within the other expenses that they have. So it doesn't mean that even if you have, a great show that might be right for them, it doesn't mean that you come in at the right time. Maybe you have to wait a year. So the complications and the variables are still there, but it's becoming, I think, more and more important for everyone.
What about sort of the flip side of that relationship where you're working maybe with pre-existing talent, like a director or a screenwriter? How do you manage those relationships when maybe you're saying, well, actually, no, we are bringing in a brand, and these are the sort of, maybe stipulations is too firm of a term, but these are the considerations you have to take into account as you're writing or directing. How do you navigate those complications?
I think it's part of the production process. I mean, as you would navigate anything else, because it is part of the production process. If there is money coming in and there is a contract, we're all working on the basis of, as you say, considerations, and that consideration needs to be taken into account. So if everything is very clear, like we make very clear from the start, everybody works towards giving, the best product at the end. Again, this brand presence should never be too strong that a viewer is turned off by the fact that there's too much branding, right? That we don't want to go there. It is a good balance between what the brand expects and knows, but also what the viewer should be watching, right? So the respect is there. So it means everybody's working towards that. So the director, the producer, everybody is. So do you have to have a brand? It's not just like I'm gonna put a sticker with a drink in there. It's not the point. The point is, how do we work around that?
Is there a certain type of vertical that you're seeing is investing into entertainment more so than another, or I guess
not
because
really.
there is such a wide range of content and storytelling opportunities for anyone?
No, not really, because I mean, it could be anything, it could be anyone, it could be, it could be at any point. And we are very open to that, by the way. We're never going to say no on the basis of a product or a brand, depending on the genre. If it fits, it fits. I don't think there is a vertical. I think there's a lot of movements around certain brands that have been a little bit more forward thinking. Some of them are in sports. Some of them are in like, fashion, for example. But then that's a whole other way of making things. It's more high end. It's probably a documentary movie like. And so I wouldn't say there is a vertical. I think there's opportunities right now in a lot of different places.
Maybe like tourism boards.
Tourism boards, yes. I mean, we work with tourism boards a lot. We did a great show with Jeremy Pang with the Hong Kong Tourism Board that has been on ITV, and it was, it's been a great way for Hong Kong to position itself in terms of come visit us. And in fact, they saw plus 18% increase on people traveling to Hong Kong year on year after the show.
Wow.
So it means it does have a direct impact on also how many people choose to go to certain places. We've seen that over time. We did the show World Cook with TUI. They needed to have something, to show it to how many places TUI can take you. And it's a cooking show, but it's a hidden travel show. And that has been extremely successful. 2 seasons, when you start doing 2 or 3 seasons of the same show with branded, it means it's more than working. So, I wouldn't, I always say the measurement of success with branded is not that you have a second season, it's the impact on the brand, because then the positioning might change, the CMO might change. But when you start doing 2, 3 seasons, it means, super success for everyone.
Got something there.
Yeah, you've got something, absolutely.
When you're working with a tourism board who are often also working with film commissions, and they obviously have their own set of tax incentives and all of that stuff, is that something that you help production teams navigate, or is that separate, or how do you sort of?
It's a local production team, and the teams,
So
locally.
that-
Whatever, all of that then gets. So I do all the bit before. So it's like the business development. It's where are the opportunities? What is the strategy with the brand? But then the production team takes over because that's their job, and they are extremely good at making the show and at dealing with the bureaucratic side of it and the content side of it. So, we do this all the time. It's also the Ofcom, for example. You have Ofcom in the UK, but you have the equivalent of Ofcom in all the territories. So you have to be careful also when you're working with brands to stay within, those rules. And we always have, for example, a representative on set that oversees, how many times do you see the brand? How is the brand shown? So it is very important to follow the rules, and it is very important to respect the local rules. That's why I'm saying it's the producer locally. So we do branded, throughout Europe. We do a lot of branded shows in New Zealand, for example. We do a lot in Brazil. So, and the rules change. So I can't be across those. And it's right that the producer does that.
Yeah. The person with that local expert.
They're handling it, yes.
Can't be everywhere.
No.
Obviously, content's one piece of it, but we mentioned live experiences
Yeah.
as well. And obviously, I guess brands coming to you have got different objectives. But I would love to kind of maybe talk through, like, obviously starts with content, but then how it connects into the live experience piece as well. And I guess how many brands are opting for that route too.
Yeah, I think it depends. I think we have for a very good example of that is we have a show in Spain that is called Operación Triunfo, which is a talent show, singing talent show. Basic, very good. Basic meaning the format style. Very good, very successful. What has been done there is that because the format is so successful, they have produced live concerts that are the Operación Triunfo live concerts, meaning you get some of the talent that is in the show, then touring Spain and performing in front of actually quite big crowds. So that extension is always possible, especially with talent shows, which are, basically concerts at the end of the day. Or, and those extensions are becoming more and more something that we're looking at because we have this live bit that we've added on to our business, and it's doing extremely well. The extension of brands. So I was talking about Black Mirror earlier, that's a brand. So how do you turn that into something that you can experience live, right? And that's an extension of a brand and not necessarily of the storyline, but it's the brand, right? Same thing that you could potentially do with other shows. We have Fort Boyard in France, and you could visit the place. And we had Crystal Maze, which is a very UK play, and we had the show for a bit, but the Crystal Maze experience is still there, right? So I think all of that is extremely important for people who might, because it comes both ways. You just maybe want to experience the show, meaning, and maybe you haven't watched the show as much, or the opposite, right? But in that way, you cater to people that want different kinds of experience, and that's very important for us. And it proves to be more and more successful.
I mean, I've never seen an episode of The Crystal Maze in my life, but I have. I went with my friends to the Crystal Maze experience, and it was great. I had a wonderful time.
So I think that's important because it's a brand, right? And we treat, and so our IPs are exceptional, and some of them should be treated and are treated more and more as proper brands that we can extend in different directions.
I guess, like you say, it's different entry points for different
audiences. Yes, exactly.
And maybe that's a good segue to talk around, obviously you've mentioned you've got so many different IPs, some that are, older IPs, some that are newer IPs.
Yes.
I guess I would love to talk around how you've been working with different creators as well, because I guess they have their own audiences. They have, they are an entry point into some of these ecosystems as well.
Yeah.
So like, how are you working with creators as well to get those IPs in front of new audiences?
I think what's interesting is that there's a lot of different ways to work with creators, and I think it's a matter of finding the right balance between what we think is the positioning with the creators and what they want to bring and what they want to do. So perfect example of that, we have done an extension of Big Brother in Germany. We have done that, and it's called Big Brother Knossi edition, because Knossi is the creator that leads this extension. And basically they've, him with 9 of his friends, so it's a total of 10 people, took over the Big Brother house for 57 hours straight, live streaming on Twitch, plus then other platforms, including YouTube. But basically, that happened because Knossi and his friends are super fans of Big Brother, and they respect the brand, and they know what they want to do, and they want to be in that context and that environment and play, actually, do the challenges. That was a very good way of integrating a passion from a creator. So if it would be unwise to say, I want that creator, but that creator is not passionate about Big Brother. Do you see what I'm saying? So that's the way, it works, because you have to be part of the show. So if you do the same thing with Survivor, you have to have someone who really wants to be on Survivor. So, and that was a great example of, they did 2 seasons of this live streaming that is doing extremely well. So it's bringing in creators, it's bringing in brands because it's branded.
Yeah.
And it's bringing in new audiences that would have not watched probably Big Brother because it's on Twitch. So Big Brother, as you say, we have older shows and newer shows, but that's an older show. It's a great IP, but it continues to give more power to that kind of IP if you get it right, like in this case. So I think that's a good way of starting to work with creatives. Of course, creators, you always have to find the right partner. That's key, because otherwise you make a mistake on both ends, right? They might lose audiences, they might lose followers, and we might lose audience, right? No, doesn't make sense.
No. I think, like you say, having someone that knows the nuts and bolts behind stuff is important, because then, like you say, it honors kind of the IP, and even if they do try to innovate slightly, perhaps in the format or whatever, to to make sure it fits for their audience, at least it's doing it in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, they're absolutely welcome, to innovate, because we're still the producers.
Yeah,
so we're still there. But it's in the German case, they were in the actual house. We just kept it open after the series ended. We kept it open for those extra hours. They're in the actual house and so excited to be there, right? So it works for all of us in that case.
I think that also comes back to what you're talking about before, is it also adds a level of authenticity, because like you just said, they were so excited to be there, and you can tell when that's a natural fit. And I think that is the same for a brand coming into a show. When you're building content around them, it feels like a natural place for them to be.
Yeah, and for example, they had to play Twister, right? And Twister was one of the brands, but it was part of the fact that they had to do, a challenge, and it was like all friends playing Twister, right? So that's how you build that. Again, don't ever, think that it's just going to be easy to put in creators and brands at the same time. It has to be a good mix.
I guess creators, they're creating content all the time, right? So like, is it a case of a lot of creators are coming to you because they want to work with IPs, or are you going to them? Or I guess like for them, they need to keep, content being churned out, quite often.
Yeah.
So like, I'm intrigued by like what that process looks like. And I guess, for a lot of them, they have huge audiences, but they still choose to work with traditional kind of producers as well.
Yeah, we've seen some of the big ones going, on streamers, and lately. It works both ways because we have such, an array of good shows. Some creators do come to us and they want to work with us, and we're continuing to have those conversations. Because again, it's about finding the right balance. How do you want to use the IP? When is that IP something available, by the way? Because maybe, it's something that is airing and we can't really touch it. So it's both ways. On our end, it's also looking for, the right people to do the right extension of the show, because we call it extension. Or, again, is it something that comes back, like The Secret Life? That's technically, it's a digital-driven new show. Not with creators, but it's on YouTube, right? And it's on Instagram, and it's through Channel 4. So it's both ways, I would say. I wouldn't say there's one dominating the other. It's both ways, because it's a good time to have those conversations.
I was curious because we talked about Black Mirror, and it also made me think of when they've done that Squid Game reality show as well. With something like that, how do you navigate the messaging around that? Because I think at the heart of Squid Game and Black Mirror is dystopia, and do you know what I mean? Like, they're quite intense and reflective of sort of the way in which things feel like they're going. And so how do you balance what that is versus what you're trying to create, which is entertainment, something fun, something engaging, and something that raises IP and brand awareness? So how do you navigate
when you're doing the live experience?
Of an IP.
I think if you choose to go to Black Mirror, you want
it's because you really want that dystopian experience.
So it's never going to be something that is too harsh, right? But it is that kind of like, so if you choose, Crystal Maze is going to be very different to a Black Mirror experience, and you're catering to that kind of audience that want to have that. So I think, it's about finding, of course, the right balance in the adventure itself, in the experience itself, but you are choosing that because it represents something that you want to play, right? So I wouldn't be too, we would never find something that doesn't cater to the audience that it has already. Going back to, the beginning of the conversation, is not to confuse what we are doing, which is entertainment, with advertising. That is really key, because otherwise you are going to get it wrong. And if you come to us saying, I want to sell my product and it has to be basically an extension of my 60-second advertising, it won't work. So we're going to always be very honest and very entertainment driven. We have worked with brands who started out like this and then understood the power of making the content and getting it right. And those have been the best experiences. So the pivoting, you were saying, how many brands might choose entertainment from the get-go. Some don't. And then they understand the process. And that's what we're there for.
Cool. Are there any like big misconceptions, I guess, around branded that, you'll have conversations X, Y, and Z, and you keep hearing them coming up and coming up and coming up?
I think one of them is budget. We adapt. It's not that branded needs to be exceptionally expensive to be effective. Actually, no, we adapt to the budgets. And the second one is the measurement bit. So the measurement bit is something we all have to work towards building more and more. It doesn't, you can't say it's not effective, because it is. It depends on what you're looking for. So the effectiveness is based on what are you really looking to get out of this piece of content, right? And then we can work towards it being effective together. Again, we're producers, right? So I don't have I'm not a CMO. We're not marketers. We are producers. So we work with the CMOs and the teams in order for that to be effective. So I think the two misconceptions are it's not going to have an effect, and actually it does, and it's too expensive, and it doesn't have to be.
Obviously, because there are those misconceptions, but they are being challenged now.
Yeah.
Like, where do you see branded going in the next couple of years? Like, do you see it becoming a core part of, well, hopefully?
I hope. No, I hope for the brands, to tell you the truth, because I mean, I think if you look at some of the pieces that have come out lately, they're working really well for the brands that have chosen it. And I think more and more, what I think will happen, and I hope will happen, is that it becomes more and more part of a normalized marketing mix, right? So instead of putting 60% of the budget into advertising, you might put 40, and then 20% goes to entertainment, right? So I think that is the natural evolution in a smart way, meaning going, that ecosystem, the building of the ecosystem should bring content as well.
I mean, to a point that you mentioned earlier, like, people are becoming ad blind, right?
Yes,
like,
completely.
Whether it's blockers or just can't deal with the amount that they're being hit with on a day-to-day basis. So I think it's trying to figure out, like, and that's where entertainment comes in, is like, how can you ingrain into that story in a way that doesn't feel like you're being sold to, right? So I think, that's where everyone is moving to. Like, how can it be more, and especially for like the live as well, like more immersive? How can you get involved in the story more and more, but in a way that doesn't feel like, people are just pushing stuff in front of you? So I think that's a big trend that everyone's going to see, right? Like, as things move more digital, like, how can you then move, people from watching content to then going to the live experiences, and it's that full kind of circle. So yeah, I think,
it is the experience at the end of the day. People are spending more in experiences than ever before. So if you tell the right story, then that's also an experience, right? It's like reading a book, watching a movie, and then going to, when possible, the actual, live.
Yeah.
Then it comes full circle. And
a lot of what people, want to go to experiences around is stuff that they're fans of, right? And people are huge fans of entertainment IP. They are a huge fan of sports. They are a huge fan of games. So I think, like, having that opportunity for people to find community through entertainment and those live experiences is inevitably where things are going to be going. So I think, like, that is a huge part of, and it's, obviously you guys have got all of those pieces connected, which is huge. But yeah, I think that's, everyone's going to be going in that direction as things become much more digital. So
probably, yes. And then you need the human bit, right? You as you say, the community and the building and the family and spending time together. So as you were talking about going with your friends, right, to Crystal Maze, it's that bit, getting away from AI, getting away from a lot of things that are less heart based
and social.
Right?
There's a connectivity. Yeah.
So even watching something together is, I've watched countless episodes of Love Island with my children, because it's like, the girls it's just fun. It's a fun experience. So the more you can do that and bring in more people watching together, the better it is. That's what we tend to do.
All right. Well, Carlotta,
we covered everything.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah.
Gabriella, thanks for joining us as well.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all for listening.
Wonderful.
And we'll see you for the next one.
Thank you very much.